on, everybody? This is dkdynamite, and tonight we're going to be talking about the full story behind Anfang regarding all the intel, backstory, and lore that Treyarch has established as we enter this new prequel of the Dark Aether storyline. Now, do keep in mind, this isn't a video where we're going to review Vanguard zombies, its shortcomings, or lack of content. I already did that in a separate video that's about 30 minutes long that I posted a good week and a half ago, and that video fairly criticizes what the mode is missing, the issues with the community right now, and that echo chamber, along with what is promising about the mode, which gets me excited for future DLC updates. But before we jump into the next chapter, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget about the video that I posted last night celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Black Ops Cold War. I went ahead and reviewed all 6 seasons of DLC updates, and talking about how the game is today compared to when it first released 366 days ago. But also big special thanks to Kaljitsu for helping me put together not only this video, but one that I posted a good week ago where we broke down the entire Vanguard storyline in the campaign, the ending, all the Treyarch connections, and more that you may have missed. That video is also linked down below. But in regards to the next chapter of our Dark Aether saga, Black Ops Cold War's chapter of the Dark Aether ended on a cliffhanger 5 years after the events of Forsaken. However, for the events of Vanguard Zombies, we're taking a bit of a step back. Rather than pushing the plot forwards, Vanguard Zombies seems like it will heavily explore concepts we were vaguely introduced to over in Cold War, giving Treyarch the freedom to utilize these fully in their next Call of Duty, presumably dropping in 2023. And this all begins with Anfang. Before we continue, let's go ahead and thank the sponsor of tonight's video. Now, tonight's video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. If you're a fan of crossplay, then Raid also has your back. This game is cross-device, you can play with the same user and switch between devices whenever and however you want. The graphics look ridiculously clean on a PC and also run very smooth on the brand new iPhone. We never got factions in Black Ops 4, but in Raid, you can actually take part in faction wars, which allow you to upgrade and sacrifice different champions, fight with your teammate against other clans' bosses, or even fight against one another. What I like most about this game is the endless replayability and grinding this game has to offer, which most full-price games don't even have today. With Raid Shadow Legends, you can enhance your character in many different ways with varying rarity, which means there's always something to grind for even when you beat some of the hardest clan bosses. Raid is soon going to release the Guardian Ring, a new feature giving everyone a new way to use their champions, including a whole faction Guardian system, allowing you to get any legendary champions you may have missed out on in the past. Raid has never been in a better place, as there are some giant updates just around the corner. Now is the perfect time to get started. You can add my username dkdynamite in-game to join my clan, and you can also support me by using the link down below in the description, since for the next 30 days you can get the epic hero Chinaru, 200,000 silver, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard to summon a champion as soon as you use my personal link. Good luck, and let me know down below what you guys are thinking of Raid Shadow Legends, and thank you to Raid for sponsoring tonight's video. Now, the first part of Cold War's chapter of this story was to introduce us to Project Endstation, originally designed as a research outpost for the German nuclear program in World War II. Endstation accidentally tore a hole in the dimensional veil between the world and the Dark Aether in March of 1944. Those following Cold War storyline will know what else Endstation researched following this, but Vanguard details what happened elsewhere as a direct consequence of this event. At this exact moment, 5 ancient artifacts in the possession of the SS battalion Die Wahrheit did activate, and this then allowed their leader, the Wolfram von List, the one and only, to bond with an entity trapped within one such artifact. But who are the Die Wahrheit? Die Wahrheit are a fictional SS battalion in Vanguard Zombies based on the real-life expeditions of the SS Anna Nerb. Die Wahrheit, in order to gain a strategic advantage over the Allies, and enabled through Reichsführer's Heinrich Himmler's obsession with the occult, attempted to find more unconventional and exotic sources of power that appear only in myths and legends, such as Thor's Hammer, the Holy Grail, Shangri-La, and even Atlantis. In 1939, von List arrived unannounced at Leipzig University in Germany. He met with a professor of demonology known as Gabriel Kraft. Von List told Kraft he had to tender his resignation immediately, pack a suitcase, and go with von List as an advisor on an overseas Die Wahrheit expedition. After Kraft laughed at the ludicrous suggestion, von List showed he was deadly serious, took his gun from his belt, and killed Kraft's assistant. After this, von List had Kraft thrown in an SS prison with a dozen other experts who had similarly been recruited from universities and museums. The officer arrived and informed the explorers, historians, and archaeologists that they will find the artifacts they were searching for, despite the fact they all knew these were objects of legend, not fact. Kraft lashed out, saying he knew what the Nazis were doing as he'd seen his friends dragged off to camps. Von List simply smiled, and instead of shooting Kraft, he sent his men to the professor's home and had his spouse taken to an interrogation cell. Now, should Kraft refuse, it wasn't he who'd suffer the consequences, but but the love of his life. Knowing he had to now follow the orders of Von List, Kraft made a silent promise that he would somehow, someday, destroy Wahrheit from within. In the coming years, Wahrheit would begin operations in Egypt, Greece, Iceland, Mexico, and even Japan, many others as well, but they uncovered strange carvings that didn't really fit with established archaeology in the regions, and later, even stranger artifacts. These artifacts, though dormant at the time, were the very same ones that would later awaken when Endstation made its initial breach. Once this happened, Von List was able to make his pact with Kortifex. He would gain the Elder God's power to raise the dead, and in return, Von List would act as Kortifex's physical body. Why this is the case, though, is a question that we'll answer later. Now, with Anfang, in mid-1944, likely around May, Von List returned to the site of Germany's greatest defeat, Stalingrad, and used his abilities, that he had been lent by Kortifex, of course, to create a containment spell, sealing off the part of the city they were currently in. With this done, he began raising the millions of corpses that littered the Eastern Front, turning them into undead revenants. Knowing the barrier would soon rise, and Von List would likely have little use for Kraft, the professor did something drastic. Using an artifact that he had recovered called the Tome of Rituals, Kraft formed a rune barrier around his office, preventing Wahrheit from being able to get to him, but also leaving him with currently no way to escape the room. With his safety assured, at least for now, he radioed for help, with a team of special forces arriving just as the barrier spell formed. However, luckily for these soldiers, it wouldn't only be Kraft guiding them, likely left out for them by Kraft. The team each bonded with one of the 4 artifacts recovered by Wahrheit, and these were Norticus, the Conqueror, the Frostblast, Bellekar, the Warlock, Aether Shroud, Inviktor, the Destroyer, which is Ring of Fire, and Saraxis, the Shadow, the Energy Mine. In these war-torn ruins and swarmed by revenants, the Special Forces team had to fend off the undead while teleporting to areas similarly investigated by Wahrheit to strike back against Kortifex and Von List. This included Merville, which shortly after their Anfang would see the D-Day landings, Hotel Royal in Paris, and a Japanese army camp, now a Wahrheit excavation site. When the team needs to rest, they're able to utilize the Rune Gate, placed at the center of the city. Aided by their unconventional allies, they open a portal which essentially acts as a bunker until they wish to fight once more. Now, we do have some immediate consequences to this story. The most obvious new addition is the word Revenant, and this is seemingly one of our first insights into the culture of the Dark Aether, as they use this word instead of zombie or undead. Other interesting note is that the containment spell we see is, in all likelihood, a phase wall. In Cold War, people like Strauss and Gray examined these phenomena with the scientific method, but to Kraft and Von List, these seem to be simply rune magic. Now, that in itself is another key point: rune magic. In the Dark Aether, beings who are natives of this world are able to use these runes in order to channel their power and manifest it in the real world. What's interesting, though, is that this isn't a new concept in zombies, as we see this in both Shadows of Evil, with the Keepers and Apothecary languages that allow wooden crates to become almost indestructible, and in Blood of the Dead's boss fight, where the Warden uses Apothecary runes of harming to literally damage the player. This would imply that rune magic is among one of the oldest arts in the Dark Aether, and whilst none of those beings from the Aether storyline exist anymore, their legacy, in a way, still lives on. One of the most interesting finds, though, is that of environmental storytelling within these maps, specifically Shinonuma. In the map, we can at first spot a Japanese painting of Saraxis appearing to samurai, but if we look a little closer, we can spot something else that really doesn't belong: a stone with an Old Norse inscription with a snake-like carving. This find really begins to sow the suggestion that these Dark Aether entities have been meddling in human affair for a long time, but then that begs the question, how could they do this before Endstation? This is a question that we'll dive into later. First, though, we need to look at the lore we get from the entities individually through their radios. Now, with Kortifex the Deathless, Kortifex was at one time the Lord of the Dark Aether, having launched a brutal conflict known as the Nether Wars against his adversaries, and ruling with an iron fist. However, Kortifex's reign would not last, as the most powerful elder gods of the Dark Aether, including his own general, allied against him. At one time, Kortifex was revered in ancient Egypt and in personal contact with the pharaoh of Egypt, who at one point was the cruelest human he had ever encountered. However, this spot will later be taken by Wolfram Von List, who he says has the blackest heart of any human he has ever encountered. Now, we then have Saraxis the Shadow. According to Saraxis, she's always had an interest in humans since we, and I quote, raised our cities. Though she sees us as interesting playthings, not a race of equals, she claims that her playthings only meet bad ends when they stop doing what she says and attempt to employ concepts like morality, which she sees as rather silly. She then goes on to claim that the ones who played well with her became emperors, conquerors, and even peacemakers in our world. This into a particular trailer still keeps her character mysterious, but it reinforces that point from earlier that these entities have been in contact with humanity for who knows how long. But we then have Inviktor the Destroyer. Inviktor, veteran of 1,000 battles in the wastelands of the Dark Aether, is a true soldier through and through, even claiming it was he who first taught mankind how to make war. In his runestone, he says he can't understand what makes this special forces team so special when he's seen the best warriors fall in battle and half-starved mothers kill soldiers twice their size to protect their children. He says that if we want his respect, we have to prove our abilities to him. From Inviktor's lore, an important thing we have to take in is the sheer number of battles he fought in. The Dark Aether is an incredibly violent place, and he is one of its best soldiers. Now we then have Bellekar the Warlock. Bellekar states that she has also been keeping her eye on humanity for an exceedingly long time, but she shows admiration for us. She is Bellekar the Warlock, and she was the one chronicler of the Nether Wars, something we will be hearing more about soon, where she wrote her histories right there on the battlefield. She says that unlike battles in Dark Aether, which are determined by raw factors, speed, deception, firepower, magic, or the weather, human battles are, in her eyes, incredibly poetic, and she asks us to keep her informed with what we're thinking at all times and not to keep secrets from her, as if we keep secrets, she can't help us. She goes on to talk about the Mayans, who allegedly understood her best. She allegedly tried to teach them the rune magic, but it overwhelmed them. Later, she was forced to watch her civilization collapse. Since then, she has always looked for the signs that suggest the impending doom of a civilization, and says that World War II is the most significant one that she has seen throughout mankind's entire history. We then have Norticus the Conqueror. Norticus, once General Norticus, Supreme Commander of the Night Legions, states at his height, his enemies would have thrown down their weapons and begged for mercy at the mere mention of his name, and yet now, he is trapped within an artifact and bound to see what he sees as a pathetic bag of blood whose lifespan is as brief as it is meaningless. However, he resolves to get out of this most unfortunate situation and promises to hone our skills and make us unstoppable. He then says, and I quote, "I save your world, you get me back to mine." He goes on to elaborate about the nature of the Dark Aether and how they have been in constant state of war since time began. Because Norticus was the greatest general, Kortifex put him in command of his armies. Then they launched the Nether Wars on all of Kortifex's rivals, but due to the Lord's cruel nature, Norticus felt no loyalty, and when he saw their enemies unifying one by one into a single army that they would not be able to beat, Norticus knew that he had to join the winning side. He tells us that when they joined together and toppled Kortifex's throne, he swore revenge, and he is now using Von List as a means to this. But these are like genies in bottles, so it's time we discuss the elephant in the room here. If these entities are from the Dark Aether, why are they acting as if they're trapped on Earth? The reason for this is because, in actual fact, these entities haven't been in the Dark Aether for some time and have been trapped within the artifacts, only now reawakening as the connection to the Dark Aether as it's reestablished with Endstation. This is also why the transmit objective is Bellekar sending a message to the Dark Aether to call for help, because currently they are on Earth and have no other way to contact those who are there. The artifacts themselves were originally created in the Dark Aether specifically to appeal to humans. However, as Kraft points out, the Smiths in the Dark Aether had virtually no experience with human culture, and so the artifacts don't really fit into any established human tradition. In these ancient times, where humans seemingly communed with these Dark Aether entities as if they were gods or spirits, it seems like they used these artifacts, although back then, the entities were still within the Dark Aether and just linked to the items, not literally within them like they are now. This raises an interesting question though. If these beings used to be in contact with humans, but Endstation allowed the artifacts to reactivate, why was Earth's connection to the Dark Aether lost in the first place? The current answer is that we don't actually know. However, the current prevailing theory from the likes of Kaljitsu here is that just like how Zykov had to go into the Dark Aether to shut the Endstation portal down, but this severed his connection to Earth, the other Elder Gods did the opposite though, sacrificing themselves to stop Kortifex and altogether bringing him out of the Dark Aether and closing whatever gateway existed from the side of the Earth. This may have even caused them to recede into the artifacts, as it was their presence in this dimension that was until Endstation allowed their connection to be reestablished. This will then explain their motivations though. They all want to go home, but in order to do so, have to use humans to transport them in their artifacts until eventually they can be sent back. Again, this is a partial theory, but what is fact is that these entities are within the artifacts and want to return to the Dark Aether. Now, in regards to the main quest and future experiences, I'll of course make a follow-up video to this one talking about whatever story implications are included in that quest. The next major addition of Anfang, aside from new objectives and features which will be coming in Season 1 without a doubt, is of course a main quest, which at this point has been implied to be Season 1 Reloaded-ish. So far what we know is that it will tie in with the arrival of an unexpected ally. That's an exact quote from Treyarch. Now we can't say for certain who this is referring to, and could even be a fan favorite character like Reznov, as some people have speculated, but given the fact that the transmit objective is all about trying to send a message to an ally in the Dark Aether, the most likely guess at the moment right now is Zealot Sparagamos, who we first heard from in Forsaken, the creator of the Chrysalax and devoted follower of the Old Ones. From a purely gameplay perspective, this would make a lot of sense, as it would allow a lore reason for a new wonder weapon from the Dark Aether to be introduced. The same person who made the Chrysalax could make our wonder weapon for Anfang. Who would have guessed? For content after that though, Intel may have an answer. When talking to Kortifex, Von List expresses his worries as he had to accelerate Warheit's timetable. The reason for this is because the Allies were beginning to assemble their D-Day invasion force, and by the time they are ready, Von List wants to ensure he has his undead army ready as well. It is therefore possible that a future Zombies experience we get in this plotline involves D-Day, though this will probably become clearer with the Season 1 intel we end up getting. Now also in Anfang, there are absolutely tons of quotes from the Dark Aether entities about things such as perks, the mystery box, Pack-a-Punch, and they also give additional lore about these items. The perks, first off, which follow a non-traditional system in this game, are confirmed to be demon blood, or to be more realistic, the blood of entities within the Dark Aether. It is implied that when consumed, this blood becomes a part of the Special Forces team. If we think about this from a scientific perspective that we get in Cold War, this is no different than to developing powers from Ethereum exposure on a large scale, like we see with Sam, but on a smaller scale here, and this exact thing happens when we drink perks over in Black Ops Cold War. The mystery box is very interesting though, as the entities comment about being unsure as to how exactly it works, but knowing full well its usefulness. Given that it's the same box as the original mystery box, and this is even true in Cold War, the implication is that it is still the same mystery box that was with us all the way back in Nocturne and Toten, and has been sitting in the Dark Aether as an ancient relic. Yes, you heard that right, all the way from the original Aether storyline in Call of Duty World at War. The Pack-a-Punch is similarly interesting though, since during most of Cold War, we assumed that Zykov had found the broken machine and then installed all the new parts we see. Later though, we found out he acquired the machine from the domain of an old one who hoarded technology, and with a twist in Forsaken, it became obvious that it was probably less that he found it, and more that he killed the old one who used to own it. Given it is in Vanguard, it seems likely therefore that the large piece now in the middle of the machine was installed by this old one as a repair. A point worth noting, however, is that people have been incorrectly claiming that the Pack-a-Punch motto is the same one used in Cold War. At first glance that seems true, but when you take a closer look, it becomes obvious this is not the case at all, and that maybe Zykov really did repair part of the machine after all. If we look at the yellow screen to the right of the centerpiece of Pack-a-Punch, we see in Cold War that it plays a little animation of different weapons, but in Vanguard, this screen is smashed and doesn't work. This also means this might be the piece responsible for dispensing AATs on guns. We obviously don't have those here in Vanguard Zombies, they're in the form of covenants. Now what's also suspicious is that the entities are unaware of who made it, the Pack-a-Punch machine that is, but Inviktor says whoever it was, they must have been a genius at the forge, maybe a reference to Jeb Brown from the original Aether story, the machine's original creator of course. Inviktor specifically also gives us two pieces of information which are quite shocking given everything we know so far. The first is that he says he has seen such crucibles like this in the Dark Aether, and that they use quote-unquote powerful magic, implying that in this new world without 115, the method of upgrading weapons uses some form of Dark Aether rune magic, and that other beings in the Dark Aether have been doing it for quite some time. The most interesting quote he says, however, is that, and I quote, Hephaestus himself would kneel at this forge. This quote is insane because for those who don't know, Hephaestus is the Greek god of smithing. This implies that either Hephaestus is a Dark Aether entity who Inviktor knew personally, and who inspired the mythological figure, or that Inviktor is incredibly familiar with the ancient Greek religion, implying that his was the first artifact found in Greece. Either way though, as the game is still new, more of these quotes are being found every day, and each entity has a large amount, so keep your ears open when playing if this interests you. So as we come to a close, even though Anfang is definitely light on content, it's important to remember that it was likely made in a very short period of time, and also likely not by the entire Zombies team, given the majority of Treyarch is likely now beginning their work on Call of Duty 2023. In spite of this, even if the gameplay is not your favorite, the amount of not only interesting lore tidbits, but story that actually impacts the rest of the Dark Aether saga on a large scale that's within Anfang is definitely immense, and it seems like we'll only be getting more of it as we learn just exactly why these entities are trapped on Earth, why the connection between humans and Dark Aether was initially lost, and how the story will progress. Items like the Tome of Rituals that seem to be an encyclopedia of Dark Aether magic will likely be expanded upon a lot more along with other artifacts throughout future DLC. It also wouldn't be surprising if in the sequel to Black Ops Cold War in 2023, or whenever that is, maybe some of these artifacts end up in the possession of Eddie himself. But that is about it. This has been dkdynamite. Leave all your thoughts down below in the comment section. What are your thoughts on the full story behind Anfang, the launch experience for Vanguard Zombies? Like I said before, and I'm going to reiterate this again, I already went over some huge criticism for the mode itself in a previous video that I also premiered live here on the channel that is linked down below, where we talked about the shortcomings with the mode, the issues with the community, and what is still promising about the mode that gives me hope for future DLC. And I'm sure I'll make a follow-up video to this one once the first main quest is solved, or however main quests there are. I'm looking forward to breaking down the story story as it further progresses into this beautiful prequel to Cold War over the course of 2022. Really hope you've enjoyed, and peace out, everybody.